Ladies and gentlemen, you can be walking free and still be in chains. You can be smiling on the outside, laughing with friends, going to work, showing up at church, but deep down you are bound, tied up in places nobody sees. See, there are chains that don't rattle when you walk. There are chains that don't make noise but weigh your spirit down every single day. Chains of fear, chains of rejection, chains of unworthiness. You've covered it with makeup, dressed it in success, and decorated it with achievements, but it's still there tight around your heart, squeezing the life out of your joy, choking the voice of your confidence. This is why some people never feel free even after the doors open, because what they're fighting isn't made of steel or stone. It's made of trauma, made of shame, made of silence. You can't medicate that kind of chain. You can't Netflix it away. You can't shop it into hiding. You can't drink it into forgetfulness. No, this is spiritual. It reaches down to the soul, wraps around the mind, and convinces you that this is just who you are. It convinces you that your worth is in your wounds, and your identity is your struggle. You've learned how to function with the chain, how to smile with the chain, how to dream small enough so the chain doesn't tug too hard. But deep down, you know there's more. You know there's freedom beyond what you've seen. You feel it in your gut when you hear truth. You sense it in your spirit when you're alone in the dark. But the chain tells you it's too late. The chain says this is your inheritance. The chain whispers you'll never be more than what happened to you. But let me speak to that lie today. That chain is not your portion. That bondage is not your identity. That heaviness is not your destiny. And you've got to stop adjusting to something God never designed for you to carry. You've got to stop building your life around dysfunction just because it's familiar. The problem isn't your desire to be free. The problem is that the thing binding you is not flesh and blood. It's deeper than that. And if it's deeper than that, you need something stronger than willpower to break it. You were never meant to do this in your own strength. That's why every time you try to fix it, it slips back. That's why you feel exhausted trying to be normal, because what you're carrying is spiritual, and only a spiritual intervention can set you free. It's not about trying harder. It's about surrendering deeper. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. There is a freedom available, but you won't find it in the applause of people or the arms of another. You'll find it when you admit, this chain is not mine to break, because some chains only break when heaven steps in. The weight you carry is not proof that you're cursed, it's evidence that you're called. The struggle you've endured, the pressure that's been applied to your life, the attacks that came out of nowhere, the betrayals that broke your trust, those weren't random. That pain was targeting something. That warfare had an assignment. The enemy never sends that much heat after something that doesn't threaten his kingdom. If your life has been under fire, it's because your future is on fire. If you've been pressed, it's because there's oil in you. Purpose always attracts pressure. You didn't go through all that hell just to go back to normal. You didn't survive all those nights crying in silence, praying in desperation, questioning your own sanity, just to fade into the background. No, the enemy saw something in you, something you hadn't even seen in yourself. He saw the leader in you before you ever led anything. He saw the gift in you before you ever used it. He saw the fire in your spirit before you ever spoke one word. And that's why the chain came. That's why the attack started when you were still innocent, still growing, still figuring things out. He tried to crush the seed before it had time to grow, Some of the things that hurt you weren't about punishment, they were about prevention. The enemy tried to use your trauma to make you quiet. He tried to use your abandonment to make you insecure. He tried to use your heartbreak to make you afraid of loving again. All because he knew that if you ever broke free, if you ever saw yourself the way God sees you, you'd tear down strongholds and set captives free. You'd walk with power, you'd speak with boldness, you'd stop settling and start living. But here's the truth. The very thing the enemy used to break you, God will use to build you. That pain you thought disqualified you is the very platform He'll use to speak through you. That chain that tried to choke, your calling is going to become the proof of your anointing. People may not understand your process, but they're going to witness your power, because what you've carried wasn't weakness, it was weight. And that weight wasn't a burden, it was preparation. So stop resenting the weight. Stop asking why you had to go through it. Start recognizing that your resistance was a setup for revelation, that your battle was a birth canal, that what tried to bury you was actually planting you. The deeper the pain, the stronger the root, and the stronger the root, the higher the tree. You weren't attacked because you're broken. You were attacked because you're chosen. And when you're chosen, the enemy gets nervous. So don't let the weight crush you. Let it remind you. There's something powerful inside you worth fighting for. When God moves, He doesn't need time, He needs surrender. That chain that's been holding you, that habit you can't shake, that thought that won't let you rest, it doesn't take years for God to break it. It just takes one moment of power, one breath from heaven, one touch from the Master. People will tell you healing takes forever. That freedom is a process, and yes, there is a journey, but don't you ever put God on your schedule. Don't you ever box Him in like He's limited to your calendar. When God decides it's time for you to come out, you coming out suddenly. There are stories in the Bible that didn't shift over decades. They shifted in a moment. Blind eyes opened in an instant. Chains fell off in the middle of the night. Lepers were healed as they walked. Don't you ever forget the power of suddenly. God can turn your situation around so fast your enemies won't have time to react. One day you're bound, the next day you're free. One day you're addicted, the next day you're delivered. One day you're in shame, the next day you're in purpose. But here's what you have to understand. Suddenly doesn't mean randomly. Just because it happened fast doesn't mean it wasn't planned. That breakthrough was scheduled before you were born. That chain-breaking moment was set into motion by every prayer you thought went unanswered. God wasn't ignoring you. He was preparing you. Sometimes God waits until everything else you've tried has failed, just so when He steps in, you'll know without a doubt it was Him. So that you won't give the credit to your grind, your network, your therapy, or your discipline, but you'll say, it was nobody but God. Some chains are stubborn. They wrap themselves around your identity. They convince you this is who you are. They stay so long you stop fighting them and start feeding them. But let me tell you something, just because it's been there a long time doesn't mean it's stronger than God. He doesn't care how deep the addiction goes. He doesn't care how many times you messed up. He doesn't care how many tears you cried or how many people counted you out. When God says enough, that chain has to break. No negotiation, no delay, no apology. You're not waiting on your moment. Your moment is waiting on your obedience. Stop saying one day, start saying today, because the enemy wants you to believe it'll take a lifetime to get free, But God is whispering, I can do it now, right here. Right in the middle of your mess, in the middle of your weakness, in the middle of your doubt. God is not intimidated by what binds you. He's not overwhelmed by what you've done. He's just waiting for an opening. And the moment you give him one, suddenly, everything changes. You can't hold the chain and reach for freedom at the same time. That's the hard truth most don't want to face. See, real deliverance doesn't begin when you shout. It doesn't start when you cry. It begins when you surrender. And not just the parts you're comfortable letting go of, but the hidden places, the wounds you stopped talking about, the habits you keep justifying, the fear you've learned to live with. As long as you're trying to control it, manage it, polish it up, and make it look pretty, you'll stay chained. Because God doesn't deliver what you pretend isn't there. He heals what you expose. Let's tell the truth. Some of us don't want to be free. We want to be comfortable. We want God to fix the problem without touching our pride. We want freedom without the process. We want resurrection without the crucifixion. But you can't be free and still try to look flawless. You can't surrender halfway. You've got to throw it all down at his feet. Your pain, your plan, your image, your control. You've got to be real enough to say, I'm not okay. I'm tired. I'm worn out from carrying this weight. Because that's where real change happens. Not in your strength, but in your breaking. Not when you've got it all figured out, but when you finally say, Lord, I give it to you. People think surrender means weakness, but it's actually the most powerful thing you'll ever do. Because the moment you let go, he takes over. The moment you drop your pride, he lifts your soul. The moment you stop trying to fix it yourself, he starts the healing you never could have imagined. But as long as you're in the driver's seat, grace is in the back, waiting for an invitation. You've been patching wounds that need surgery. You've been using band-aids on what requires a breakthrough. And God is saying, if you'll stop covering it, I'll start healing it. He's not waiting on you to be perfect. He's waiting on you to be honest. Deliverance starts when you stop defending what's destroying you. When you stop protecting the very chain that's been holding you captive. There's a power that shows up in surrender that doesn't show up anywhere else. Because when you lay it all down, that's when heaven steps in. That's when grace flows. That's when chains start to crack and shackles start to fall. You'll feel lighter, not because the situation changed yet, but because you're no longer carrying what you were never built to hold. Don't let your ego cost you your freedom. Don't let your image block your healing. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to give God access. The moment you do, something begins to shift. Not slowly, not someday, but right now, because freedom doesn't come when you fight harder. It comes when you let go and say, God, I trust you more than I trust me. He saw you in the chain and still called you chosen. That's the part that'll break you down in worship when you truly understand it, because people left when they saw your mess. Friends distanced themselves when the chain got heavy. Some folks praised you when you looked strong, but disappeared when you started to struggle. But God looked at you tangled up, confused, broken, addicted, angry, ashamed, and he still said, that one's mine. He didn't wait for you to get it all together. He didn't need you to clean up before he claimed you. He called you while you were still bound. See, the chain didn't cancel the calling. The mistake didn't erase the anointing. The detour didn't disqualify the destiny. You may have gotten lost, but heaven didn't lose track of you. You may have felt unworthy, but your worth was never based on how you felt. It was based on who made you. And the one who made you still sees greatness in you, even when you can't see it in yourself. Let's get real. Sometimes the hardest thing to believe is that God still wants you, after the abortion, after the divorce, after the addiction, after you did the very thing you promised you'd never do again. The enemy whispers you've gone too far. But God says, my grace goes further. The enemy says, you're too dirty. But God says, I've already covered it. The enemy says, you're disqualified. But God says, I've called you anyway. That's why grace is so offensive, because it shows up where people think it shouldn't. It wraps its arms around the prodigal while the older brother looks on confused. It covers the woman caught in adultery while the crowd is ready to stone her. Grace steps into the prison before the sentence is over and says, come out. And when God speaks that over your life, there is no opinion that can override his voice. You are still his. That's what the enemy doesn't want you to remember. That's why the chain tried to make you forget your identity. Because if you ever realized who you are, if you ever truly believed that he still calls you chosen, you'd stop living like a prisoner and start walking like a son, like a daughter, like royalty. God doesn't choose perfect people. He chooses willing people. People who limp, people who struggle, people who have a past. People just like you, and his calling is not based on your perfection. It's anchored in his purpose. He's not intimidated by your issues. He's not surprised by your flaws. He saw it all, and still he said yes. So don't disqualify yourself from what God has already approved. Don't sit in the cell when the door's been opened. You may have been in chains, but you were never disowned. He's calling you back not because of who you've been, but because of who he's always known you could become. When the chain finally breaks, you won't be standing there bragging about how strong you were. You'll be on your knees, trembling with gratitude, saying, God, I don't know how you did it, but thank you, because this freedom won't be the result of your hustle. It won't be your routine, your therapy, your willpower, or your knowledge that did it. It'll be the undeniable, unshakable, unmatched power of God that reached down into the pit and pulled you out. This kind of deliverance doesn't leave room for ego. When God breaks that chain, it silences pride. You won't get the glory, he will. People are going to ask you, how did you overcome that? And your only answer will be, God did it. They'll wonder how you made it through the depression that almost swallowed you whole, how you got up from that bed of shame, how you walked out of an addiction that had its hands around your neck for years, and they won't be able to explain it because it won't make sense. There won't be a textbook explanation. It'll be something supernatural, something powerful, something holy. Because what had you wasn't natural, and what freed you wasn't either. This is where God shows his might, not in the absence of chains, but in the breaking of them. The testimony isn't that you never struggled. The testimony is that you were bound and now you're not. That you cried yourself to sleep and still woke up full of purpose. That you fell, but grace caught you. That you were at your lowest and he reached you there. God doesn't rescue you to make you look good. He rescues you so people can see how good he is. That's why the chain had to break publicly. That's why some people saw you fall. That's why you didn't get to hide your pain. Because when God sets you free, it's going to bless somebody else. Somebody who's in the same darkness you were in. Somebody who needs to know that deliverance is possible, that healing is real, that God still moves. And when you walk free, you don't just walk for you. You walk for the ones still in chains. You carry the light now. You carry the evidence. You become the living, breathing, undeniable proof that God's power is greater than man's struggle. You don't have to preach a sermon. Your life becomes one. Your joy, your peace, your smile, your freedom. Those things preach louder than any microphone ever could. So when people see you now and they wonder how you're still standing, how you're still sane, how you're still whole, just smile and say, "If you only knew what I came through," because that's the kind of freedom that shakes nations. That's the kind of breakthrough that draws people to the feet of Jesus. Not because of how perfect you are, but because of how powerful He is. The glory is His. The chain is gone. And you're living proof that only God could have done it.